walls is declared a peacetime emergency under Executive Order 20-01 in response to COVID-19, and the Metropolitan Council Chair has determined it's not practical or prudent to conduct an in-person management committee meeting for reasons stated in the government's executive order. Accordingly, Metropolitan Council members participate in this meeting via telephone or other electronic meetings of the management committee will still be conducted under Minnesota Statute 13D-02 or .021 at the date and time stated. The meeting will be live streamed and recorded. We encourage people to monitor the meeting remotely, and if people have comments, they're encouraged to send those comments via the email to us. Can we call the meeting to order and do a roll call, please?
Barber. Okay, I thought I saw her. Gonzalez.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Lee. Lilligren.
Here.
Muse.
Here.
Ferguson.
Here.
Thank you.
And I think Councilmember Barber's on too, but we will see.
She's having audio issues. Okay.
Yes, I'm here now.
Okay,
Gotcha.
thank you.
Perfect, thanks. Are there any changes to the agenda?
Mr.
We
Chair,
do
I
have-
don't see any.
You don't see any. Okay. So we do have one comment that somebody would like to make on our information item that we have upcoming. So I just thought we would do that at the beginning and let her have 2 minutes to make a comment on that information item, advancing equity in the region item. And if trying to see if I can see her on my list. Patricia, are you ready to go? There we go. Thank you.
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair. Can you hear me? Just making sure.
I can. Yep.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to comment today. And I recognize this is maybe not as common to do in front of the management committee, so I wasn't quite certain of the protocol, but I really appreciate the opportunity to provide very brief comments to you today as you consider the informational item on advancing race equity initiatives at the Metropolitan Council. My name is Patricia Nauman. I'm the Executive Director of Metro Cities, representing cities across the metropolitan area at the legislature and the Metropolitan Council. And we do play a unique role in the local government advocacy community in our representation of the shared interests of cities at the council. Cities do consider themselves to be your primary constituency because they are responsible for both implementing a lot of what comes out of the council and of course for the comprehensive planning that gets done based on the work nexus with regional systems. I do appreciate, Metro Cities certainly appreciates the efforts being made by the council on the race equity initiatives. Metro Cities' own legislative policies do support initiatives at the state, regional, and local level to advance race equity and to provide resources in that direction. I do, Mr. Chair and members, just want to raise a brief point of concern on the proposal that would employ the SAC mechanism to pay for specific initiatives in this regard or any regard. Metro Cities policies do support the SAC program and do support principles for that program and its operation that include transparency with respect to the fee. It is a user fee program. We support transparency with respect to the fee structure, administrative reasonableness in the program, equity for all served communities and between current and future users. And the association does oppose the use of the SAC mechanism to subsidize or incent any specific regional goals and objectives under the premise that the SAC program is based. It is a user fee program. It is paid for by, all users contribute and pay for that capacity that it funds. And again, it's intended to pay for the cost of additional infrastructure capacity and to pay the debt service on that capacity. Using SAC to pay for any programs or specific goals has the potentially, if it were actually being paid for with the SAC fee, that does compromise the integrity of the program and would result in an inequitable shifting of SAC costs. I do recognize that this proposal does not use the SAC fee per se. I just wanted to flag it as a point of sort of raise the caution on it, that it could set a precedent for the use of this fee structure that we would be certainly watching very closely, would have some concerns about. So thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions. And this is just something that Metro Cities has taken a lot of look at over the year, lots of looks at over the years. We have worked very closely with MCES staff on the structure of SAC and making sure that users are, the people who pay for those fees and pay for that infrastructure know that it's a program that is, basically a cost of service and is equitable among all users. So thank you very much for the opportunity today, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you. I think when we get to that item, we'll just have people address those concerns at that point in time. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So with that, can I get a motion to approve the minutes of the Management Committee meeting on February 10th, 2021?
Lilligren moves.
Johnson seconds.
Any discussion? All right. Can we call the roll, please?
Barber,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
Lee,
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Muse,
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. So we have no business items on the agenda today, but we do have a couple of rather lengthy informational items on the agenda. So the first item, if you remember when we passed the budget for 2021, we had set aside $3.9 million for different ideas around racial equity or equity broadly. And so this is the proposal from staff, and if you add up all of the amounts, it's more than 3.9 million. So we don't have the option of funding all of these. And we may choose to fund some in more or less amounts than what is originally suggested. But we will have the different departments and finance folks from each one go through all of them. I think we'll do questions as we go, and then I think we'll just have to be mindful of the time so we can try to get through all of the different ideas that people have. And so just one comment for the proposers or the people that are looking at it. I think just one general comment I'd like people to address is just why, if it's something you're proposing, why is it something that we should not or would not be funding in our normal course of operations? Because obviously there are certain equity is just generally something we're looking to do in the region. So why is it something that if it's important, why did you leave it out of your budget originally and are requesting the funds for it to happen at this point in time? So with that, we can start. Mary, did you have any overarching comments, or should we start into the first item?
Mr. Chair, I'm going to let Marie introduce the item and the members.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. And actually, Mr. Ferguson, you have hit on all of my talking points for the presenters and for the committee members here today. We do have multiple presenters for your consideration on these ideas. And after each presenter of the idea, we are welcome to all questions. And we've set aside an hour of today's meeting for that. So if we can start the slide presentation and go to the next not the next slide, but the next one, and we will have Amy Venowitz start her presentation. One more slide, Greg. Perfect. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry, Amy, it's Jody that is up first.
Okay, I was gonna say, I didn't remember being first, but okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Jody Jacoby, and I'm the director of the procurement department. I'm here today with a collaborative proposal for consideration prepared by 3 departments: procurement, Human Resources, and the Office of Equal Opportunity. These projects are closely linked, and together we believe there is significant ability and the opportunity to reduce disparities in the region by advancing equity in contracting. The cumulative funding request is $500,000. Procurement, which is the third in the list, is looking to build capacity for MCUB business. This portion of the request is seeking funds for a consultant to assist with a supplier and contract management system that will be a one-stop shop for all things contracted related. This will enable a much higher level of support for our vendors, especially our MCUB vendors, to be able to track them, provide a higher level support, improve reporting, and just make it easier for vendors to do business with the council and get the support that they need. Additionally, it will add reporting capacity to track and assist them throughout the process. Next, I'll turn it over to Marcy Simon to talk about the funding request from HR.
Mr. Chair and council members, part 2 of this proposal is to reimburse council contractors that hire Building Strong Communities graduates as registered union construction employees. Now, the Human Resources Workforce Development Department created the Building Strong Communities program in collaboration with 12 local construction trades organizations, and it was designed to provide pathways for typically underrepresented people of color and women into a number of registered apprenticeships. So this hourly reimbursement would be the council's recognition that there are extra costs and risks borne by the contractor when hiring individuals with limited skills who are learning the trade. And we have not budgeted for this kind of incentive in our work, and budgets are created a year in advance, and this would be an incentive. And now I'll turn it over to Cy Jordan.
Is this different than the slide that we have?
Mr. Chair, I was just explaining what the on-the-job training opportunity is.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
Thank you, Chair, council members. To your question, Chair, we do have an additional proposal around the software system that Jody brought to your attention. And then on this particular request, we have the financial incentives as the first item for exceeding MCUB goals. That would be 2 pilot projects that we would be looking to move into, one for construction exceeding goals, one for goods and services exceeding goals. And then that third category around building capacities for MCUB businesses would support the business engagement and development that would provide the technical assistance needs that we have identified through collective input that will promote equity and improve diverse spend around our local and state fund spending. It will foster the participation of the MCUB businesses through the direct connection in council procurements. And this funding as a service unit under the regional administrator, we don't readily have funding dedicated to us for these particular services and needs. And so we would use this to start our engagement and development and continue on in future years. And that is the end of our presentation for the Advancing Equity, so we'll take questions.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is this. This is very interesting. So within this outline of the program, and it's a 2-year program, again, I'm assuming $500,000 for the 2 years, or $500,000 each of the years. I'm sure that was covered and I missed it. But my question is this: how do we ensure that what we're doing here will replicate and scale into a sustainable model that can be moving forward without this type of funding? Because ultimately the goal is that, we increase, exceed our MCUB goals and get BIPOC people with in the workplace and expand that. But this is a limited time incentive. So it's going to go to the bottom line, and we hope that it, will demonstrate that it brings people into the workplace, giving more opportunity. But then what after 2 years? How do we, it's a pilot project. I want to understand better how this pays itself forward and how we get dividends back in our goals.
Mr. Chair, council members, one of the thoughts that I have about this kind of these programs is that sometimes it's demonstration, and I think it's experience that people then have about the viability of the program. And so I think if there's any in any way that people are reticent to get involved, this helps take care of some of that, and then they have the experience and can say, oh yes, we see how this works. This is something we want to be a part of.
Mr. Chair, my follow-up question is then, okay, that would be good. Hopefully it's a positive experience. But is there anything that by participating in the program, they agree then to fill in the blank that would further these goals, or that they then would, or somehow that would be shared out with other employers that haven't participated in the program? I'm not opposed to making investments because it's very worthy goals. We know that, but I'm just trying to understand the time frame, the amount we chose, and again, how do we report back? How do we know it's been a success? How do we scale it up? How do we expand those opportunities, assuming that we're not going to be able to put money like this in, year after year?
Chair, council members, when it comes to the item that we have identified for building the and continuing capacity for MCUP businesses themselves, we have a fuller presentation that answers just those questions. And so they would be around the 5 areas that we have of increasing the pool for the MCUP firms, developing that MCUP capacity, and building that technical expertise, as well as financial literacy, and continuing with our mentor-protege relationships. We do have measurements and metrics identified for the increased number of MCUP bidders, the number of MCUP contracts awarded, increased spend with those MCUP businesses, particularly around diverse spend and reducing disparities where we currently have them, increasing capacity of those firms again. And so we have additional measures around increasing revenue for those firms, increasing the number of partnerships and mentor-protege programs that are developed in relationships out of this initiative, and increasing with those businesses. As those businesses grow, they certainly employ additional people, and they tend to employ from their communities. And so we want to measure that as well. For each of them, we do have identified specific funding for the building capacity is at $175,000 to kick off this, and then we would be incorporating in future years funding and making a request based upon our measurements to the regional administrator for additional funds to continue in our programming. For the item number 2, we have identified a certain amount as well of $100,000 to kickstart that effort, or $200,000 actually, as Marcy spoke to, $100,000 in the first year, $200,000 in the second year, around that, demonstrating the success the first time and then making it sustainable as we continue on. And then for the first area around the financial incentives, again, we want to test this program, see how successful it is, and we have identified $75,000 for a major construction incentive and $50,000 for professional or technical services incentive.
Mr. Chair, just one final question. So Mr. Chair, the money then, so this could go to the contractor. This is to encourage a contractor to bring on MCUP businesses into the project and hire on people, or would this money be going directly to MCUP businesses? I'm sorry, I'm just making sure I understand.
Yeah, the first item, the thought is it would go to contractors that exceed the MCUP goals. So as an incentive, as opposed to sort of a requirement, it's just we can set a goal number that might be significantly higher than what our sort of normal target is, and those that achieve that would be able to get an incentive to achieve that. And so just what we know from some large contracts, the contractors don't make that much money overall in the size of the contract, so small incentives are often very effective at at encouraging certain types of behavior that would be beneficial to the community. Councilmember Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really appreciate Councilmember Johnson's question. I think it gets to the heart of why we do this work, and we should take the long view about how this work can be sustainable after we leave as council members, and even if there's staff turnover, how can some of these important protocols stay in place so that a new council comes in and doesn't have to reinvent the wheels for such important work. And I also am excited about this because I think anything we can do to break down silos and barriers to have a one-stop shop where folks can come and learn and get resourced is important. And in an institution where, like all government institutions were, so we can be very bureaucratic and confusing. That's my comment. Thank you.
Okay. I think in the interest of time, we will move on to our next item so we can get through all of these. And if people, council members have additional questions, they can email me and we will work and get answers from staff on those so we can make decisions at the end. So the second item that we have is the Local Housing Initiatives Account Program.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is Tara Beard. I'm the Livable Communities Manager, and I'll be presenting this slide to you all. In answer to your earlier question, Mr. Chair, we have not left the Local Housing Incentives Account Program, or LHIA as we refer to it, out of our budget. We've simply maximized the revenues available for it for 2021. And despite that fact, we continue to have an incredible lack in the availability of affordable housing and an incredible need for additional funding for the creation of affordable housing. And so that's what fuels this request. So LHIA funding is used, as I mentioned, to create and preserve affordable housing throughout the 7-county metro in communities that are participants in the Livable Communities Act. We have been contributing a minimum of $1.5 million toward Minnesota Housing's consolidated RFP that includes a group of funding partners that support affordable housing on an annual basis since the Livable Communities Act was created in 1995 and begun in 1996. In recent years, it hasn't been uncommon for the council to add additional funding to that base amount of $1.5 million that's defined in statute. And in fact, last year, the council approved the highest award amount ever for 2020 for LHIA at $4.5 million. Nevertheless, there is nowhere near enough funding for the need that is out there. Last year alone, less than half of the applications for affordable housing projects through the consolidated RFP were funded, and we only represent 7% of the total funding available. And that was last year, which was a significantly higher LHIA contribution to the total funding pool than there is in most years. For 2021, the council later today will be acting on a recommendation to make $4 million available for the Local Housing Incentives Account Program in total. But as I mentioned before, we could double, triple, quadruple, quintuple this amount and get that money out the door next year in affordable housing projects that are ready to go. And there just simply isn't enough funding for the need or the demand for construction dollars. So the measurements that we could use to track the value of this funding would be the number of new units compared to the forecasted need for additional affordable housing that we provide and is in adopted comp plans across the region. We could certainly look at the number of units compared to the number of housing cost burdened households throughout the region. And we can look at disparities in housing stability and access, though we have to do that cautiously, realizing that LHA continues to be a small portion of total available affordable housing funding, so can only have the commensurate impact on where we see progress. So that pretty much summarizes the request, and I'm happy to take any additional questions.
Are there any questions from council members? Just so for every $100,000, let's say, that we contribute to this, how many affordable housing spots does that create?
Mr. Chair, as you know, that it depends. The answer is it depends. But when we think about multifamily housing, affordable housing units, brand new construction, the general consensus is that the cost is usually somewhere between $250,000 to $300,000 per unit. It's considerably less to preserve an existing affordable housing unit. And when we start to look at single family and affordable home ownership subsidies, those are often follow kind of a different formula that makes it hard to compare in terms of apples to apples. But for a new affordable rental unit, the cost per unit is roughly $250,000 to $300,000.
Okay. Any questions on this one? All right, thank you. Councilmember Bard, do you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I understand the value of this program and definitely understand the need for affordable housing, but I think my feeling with the large group of projects that we're having proposed to us, I'd have a hard time dedicating all of the money towards this program.
Okay. Next item is manufactured home connection assistance to Metropolitan disposal system.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we could advance the slide, please. While we wait for that, my name is Ned Smith. I am the Director of Pretreatment and Finance for Environmental Services, and I'm also joined by Freya Thaumann, who is our partner from CD, who's helped us with manufactured homes in the past. Could I ask, is it just me that's not seeing the next one, or are there others? Councilmember Ferguson?
It's not on the main screen. I'm seeing it on my own screen, but
there it goes.
There we go.
So the goal of this program is to preserve at-risk affordable housing by keeping residents connected to their opportunities in the community. A lot of times their opportunities are close to their homes, and this would allow them to stay in that community. And also there's an environmental and water quality benefit in there as too. Manufactured home parks typically have their own wastewater treatment system that is separate from the rest of the Metropolitan disposal system. And what this program does is helps those manufactured park owners transition and build, perhaps even build the infrastructure so that they can connect to the Metropolitan disposal system and decommission their water treatment facilities. We would partner with community development as we did in the past. You may remember seeing a similar program at in Corcoran for the manufactured home park there. As part of the agreement, we work with the manufactured home park owner to make sure that it stays a manufactured home park for a certain amount of time, and that the manufactured home park owner can't increase the rents based on the SAC fees. And so the proposal here is to use this equity grant to pay up to 50/50 or larger portion of the SAC conversion fee. So when a manufactured home park disconnects from its treatment plant and connects to us, we need to charge each one of the manufactured homes in the park a SAC fee, because that's a connection to the system and is requiring capacity. The way we would measure this is we would look at converted or connected manufactured homes that got on the program. We would look at preserving how many affordable housing units were preserved. And then we'd also do some qualitative look at the environmental and water quality benefits by removing from those underperforming privately operated treatment facilities. We have two parks identified at this time. One is up by East Bethel. It's actually right next to our treatment plant. And then the other is in Elko New Market as that whole city transitions to the Metropolitan disposal system. But we would basically put it out for bid, and if kind of whoever's ready, that's the one that we would have join us. And with that, I would like to ask if Freya has anything she would want to add, and then we'll stand for questions.
Thanks, Ned. I think that covered it. Thank you.
Okay. So just Ned, and maybe just comment on both this one and then the next SAC one. How does doing this impact other people's SAC fees?
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, because we would be using the grant funds to pay for it, it would have no impact to other SAC payers. The way that we envision this is we would get the money to the manufactured home park home owner, who would then pay the city, who would then pay the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services. So our SAC coffers would be completely unaffected by this.
Okay.
Mr. Chair.
Councilman Johnson.
One quick follow-up on that. So just again, to be clear, the source of the grant funds to operate this program is from what?
It's our general purpose levy.
Okay. So the SAC, okay. All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question too.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my question comes from with a number of these manufactured home areas that have private owners who we've tried to engage to get them connected to our system previously. And so how are we going to engage? Because there will be some investment on their part. And being private owners, they're not always wanting to connect to the Metropolitan Regional System.
Mr. Chair, I'll take the first stab. Also, I want to correct myself. I said it was Elko New Market. The other location is in Lake Elmo, and that city is in the process of transitioning to the MDS. I believe the question was, how do we incent folks or get them interested? One thought is a lot of time there may be cases where their permit to maintain and operate their own private water treatment facility is either expiring, or there are upgrades that are being asked, and they would find that it's more economical to join us. And I'm not sure if I caught the nuance of the question, but what we find is these are owned by a single owner, and then they rent their pads out to the individual residents. So the residents really wouldn't be paying. We would just need to work with that manufactured park homeowner.
Yeah, no, it was the park owner that I just know that when we've had some conversations down in my district, there's been some hesitancy on behalf of the park owners.
Freya, can you speak to any initial interest that we have seen from the Lake Elmo Park or the Lake Elmo, the East Bethel Park or the Lake Elmo Park?
Freya, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Okay. Any other questions for Ned on this one?
Mr. Chair, briefly.
Councilman Johnson.
So say we move forward, we get an owner that's willing to do this, we subsidize the connection, that's good. What then in the future do we have that would help to preserve affordable housing should that owner want to sell to a different owner? I'm assuming that once it's connected, there's value that would be added to the property for being connected to the wastewater system. So is there something within the program that it certainly doesn't immediately impact the renters because we're trying to help cover that improvement, but what about in the future if that owner wants to sell? Is there anything to help preserve the affordability to protect those renters going forward?
So, Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I see that Freya has lost her connection. Let me see. I'll pause for 5 seconds to see if she answers, and then I'll take my best shot.
Mr. Chair and committee members, I'm back. Sorry about that. I'm connected. Councilmember Johnson, I can speak to the pilot that we just had, and I'm sorry, I'm just connecting back in, but with the pilot that we had with Corcoran, in exchange for the 50-50 match on the SAC, the owner agreed to no unreasonable rent increases for a period of 20 years, and then they also agreed to keep the park as a park. And with that, through the grant agreement, we have there's a restrictive covenant too on the property. And then the grant agreement also has written into it a payback schedule. Should the owner no longer be in compliance with the agreement, then they would have to pay back the dollars. And so it's a prorated payback schedule.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Freya. I thought that's what was in place to a degree. I didn't have the specificity in Corcoran, but that's what I was looking for, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions on that item? All right, Ned, you're up with the next one, SAC grant for affordable housing.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I'm still Ned Smith. The next one we want to explore is using the equity grant to help with SAC for affordable housing. And this very similar to the manufactured home park. The difference here is we're not converting, we are starting a new home. And we would again partner with CD. I'm now joined by Tara Beard, who is from our community development in livable communities. And she can also help deal with, answer some of the nitty gritty. But we would look at ways that we can provide affordable home developers with a portion or all of the SAC charge. And we would here look again to have a similar covenant to make sure that it stays affordable housing, that the rents stay reasonable, and that if there is any breach of contract, that we would get that money refunded. And we are also looking that it may be more efficient to partner with LHIA, since that's a method that we already use to get funds out to developers. So if this opportunity is chosen, we will need to figure out what is the best way to get through that. Also making sure that we are addressing some of Ms. Nauman's concerns for metro cities. And obviously the measurement we would use would be to look at affordable housing units that were built in the program. And at that, I'll turn it to Tara if you have anything else to add.
Not at this time, but happy to answer any questions.
So when we looked, I was looking through the sort of just some initial thoughts that I had, just wanting to make sure that if we end up agreeing to do a grant program for this, that we're looking at more sort of buildings that have a higher percentage of affordability. So, you know, if somebody has 2 affordable units out of 100, that those aren't the ones that we're looking at. So, you know, and I'm not saying what that number would be, but, you know, if it's half affordable. The other part that I hear from communities is the real challenge is the 30% AMI affordability spots, right? So, you know, there's some projects that are going on in the Midway right now where they're deemed affordable, but that's because there's a 400 square foot space that's for $1,000 a month, and there's a limited number of those. So from a family perspective, that's not really an affordable spot that's usable and workable. So if we were going to make an investment of grant dollars into something like this, I just want to make sure we're going and trying to tackle some of those really lower end affordability, or, you know, the areas that the market has the most difficulty in meeting the need and structure it that way. So with that, any comments from other council members? That's just sort of a thought on more detail than what you have. Obviously what you said doesn't prevent that, but just sort of a comment on that. Other council members?
Mr. Chair, this is Councilmember Barber.
Go ahead, Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I definitely, I'm a little uncomfortable with this one too, mostly in line with Patty Nauman's comments at the beginning. And one big concern, and the reason why this one makes me a little worried, is even though we could maybe do this, a lot of the fees that really impact some of these projects are the more local fees. So cities, so it's their sewer and water connection fees, parks fees, some of those things. So I think I'd want a better understanding of what kind of impact we could actually make with this, because sometimes we may be the ones that people are talking about as having the high fees, but we're not necessarily always the ones who are driving the fees that are being paid.
Yeah, that's a good note. Councilmember Johnson, did you have a comment?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I appreciate Councilmember Barber's comments, and I really appreciate yours as well, especially for 30% AMI. You guys know I am all about affordable housing and how do we get there, and I really appreciate Tara's work on this. I will just say too, though, that, you know, we are still, I think, you know, in the Housing Policy Work Group, we have this discussion, you know, how do we ensure we get dollars like this, you know, throughout the region? And for some regions, even trying to do, you know, 60% AMI is really a struggle. So what I start to worry about is, yes, we should make sure we're investing where we get, again, the best impact and outcomes. But I also don't want to preclude communities who just don't have a shot because they don't have enough 30% AMI. And I'm starting to just get a little nervous that, you know, it's already hard to push projects through, and, you know, how do we, it'll be handled, you know, as we score, and Tara's got a handle on that. But again, I don't want it to be where, you know, only certain locations are able, you know, throughout the region to hit that 30% AMI. Hopefully, you know, other projects that are very worthy, that are trying to meet the needs of, you know, low-income working families, have a shot at this too.
Any other thoughts? All right, Ned, we have a third one from you, Environmental Services Youth Job Skills Program.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And for this one, I'll be relying heavily on my partner from HR Workforce Development, Aaron Koski. He will be outlining the details. Aaron?
Good afternoon. This is Aaron Koski, Senior Manager of Workforce Development in the Human Resources Department. I'm representing Jen Zukowski, our partner and co-author, if you will, of this request. In summary, we are looking for seed money to begin developing programming that would develop pipelines for underrepresented individuals, people of color, and females for a number of frontline technical positions in environmental services. There are many established entry-level programs already existing in ES, and this would most likely focus on preparing individuals to be successful in those programs. So we're not redesigning the wheel, we're just strengthening the pipelines that already exist. We'll also be focusing heavily on the youth, defined as 18 to 24, and providing them the clear pathways to a career in a number of environmental service positions. The grant request would allow for 2 cohorts over the span of 2 years to receive preparedness training and be on a pathway to hopefully gain employment in the Met Council Environmental Service and a related field.
Just a quick, are we partnering with any of the trade unions on this, or would that be our thought, or how would the unions factor?
So that is there are a number of unions, obviously, that represent the Metropolitan Council Environmental Services. Many of you, many council members, Mr. Chair, and others may be aware of the Building Strong Communities program, which was referenced earlier. That is with the 12 construction union trades. This program will probably have some synergy and alignment, but not all construction trades in the Building Strong Communities program are also present in environmental services, if that makes sense.
Okay. Other questions from council members? Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say I love this one. This really reminds me of when we did the bus mechanic training program, which also, if I recall, started through an equity grant. And it was something that was built up over the years. And as you all have seen, it's been very successful and continues to be successful. So I think this is the perfect, this is a really good example of what we like to see.
Any other comments on this one? All right, thank you. Our next one that we have is equity evaluation. What's I skip one? Equity evaluation of regional transportation investment.
Mr. Chair and members, thank you. Amy Venowitz with MTS Long Range Transportation Planning. So this proposal calls for an in-depth evaluation of our existing transportation funding, planning, and programming processes, structural inequities, and kind of take the processes apart, and at each step of the way ask ourselves questions about equity and identify inequities, and then to recommend actions or strategies that we can take to reduce the inequities or to institute new types of processes and programs, with the overall goal of having more equitable transportation decision-making and transportation outcomes and investments. So this proposal is maybe a little bit different from some of the other proposals you're looking at in that it's an overall evaluation of existing processes. So given that we don't really know what the outcomes might be or what the recommendations might be, we do instinctively feel like there are processes and decision-making that can be improved and made to be more equitable. But not knowing the outcome also gives us the opportunity to maybe have more what I would call transformational change rather than instituting kind of what we term transactional type programs. So this project is called for in the Transportation Policy Plan. It's something we've been thinking about and would like to do. Under our current transportation planning availability of funding, we probably would not be engaging in this work until 2022 or 2023. So this funding gives us an opportunity to implement the project sooner and hopefully on a shorter timeline and potentially with a bigger scope. We are anticipating $400,000 at this point over an 18-month period. And the goal would be to have recommendations or changes in our hands so that we could impact the 2023 transportation budget session in case there are legislative changes that would result from this project. So that is the overall project. We would also work with the project advisory committee made up of policymakers and hopefully majority representatives of Black, Indigenous, people of color representing communities in our region, and then also council members and other policymakers from cities and counties. I think with that, I can take any questions about the proposal.
Councilmember Barber.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for indulging me today. This one, I think, is something to me is really important. Right now, TAB is also going down and trying to look at how they address equity in their regional solicitation, so the federal dollars that come through. And we know that some of these big transportation projects have truly been some things that have led to some of the disparities in the Twin Cities region. So I think if we look at this right and we can build this in and we talk about how we want to leave a long-standing mark, the information that we would garner from a study like this would feed the next version of the transportation policy plan. So some of the good work that we're doing now would inform the long-term planning and vision kind of out over the next decade. So, it seems like, to me, it's good timing because it's going to inform that broader conversations we're having around the next version of Thrive and the upcoming transportation policy plan. And it also does mesh really well right now with the work that's being done with TAP.
And I guess my only question on this one was, why wouldn't we just put it in the budget if it's something that we're required to do and we have planned to do anyways and have budgeted to do, it sounds like in 2022, why would we be?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. So I do want to clarify, we are not required to do this work, but it is something that we identified as a piece of transportation planning work that should occur. Just a quick description of the transportation planning program operates on federal funding, and we propose a work program and give it to MnDOT for review and approval about 6 to 8 months ahead of the next year. So at this point, we would be in April and May beginning our 2022 program planning. And this is definitely something that we could include in that, but that would not allow us to begin it until calendar year 2022. And the other piece that would be very difficult is $400,000 for a consultant project in any 1 year is quite a bit for our budget. Typically, our planning studies are on the order of $50,000 to $100,000 range. So if we were going to fit a project of this size into 2022 calendar year, we would have to reduce other planning work that is on other subjects, but also is necessary work.
Are there any other comments?
Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So on this, very supportive. From having participated in a lot of the community input around Network Next and some of the transportation planning that we're working on now, we're talking about engagement all the time. So to have some formal program for this is really great when it relates to BIPOC impact, engagement, outcomes, all of that. I'm really thrilled to hear that. But, the sooner the better, because, we're planning and we're setting these things, and we've had workshops, and we've asked who's come and how are they engaged. And I guess the only thing I would say is, who, not to be answered now, but, how do we choose the consultant? How do we make sure that the project advisory committee, is really has the breadth and depth of the people that we want to help us all make these decisions going forward, so that again, we're not just transactional, we're transformational. And I guess, I'll leave it at that for now. I'm almost wishing we could have gotten a head start on this sooner. But it's good. And the only last thing I would say again is, how do we make this sustainable so that it's not a project that we're doing to do this. It becomes part of who we are in anything that we're doing. So I understand, getting going and maybe needing some consultancy to get our heads around this. But for me, I really, I'm hoping that it becomes part of who the Met Council is in their work day to day. And so that's all I'll say about this.
All right, any other comments on this one?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this is Robert, Councilmember Lilligren. Yeah, thanks. And, I really agree with what Councilmember Barber said, what Councilmember Johnson said, but really kind of underscoring that this is work that I feel like we should be doing as a normal, within our work. And it's just looking at the cost of the investment, and I understand, that this is much larger than our usual project cost, but the product being recommendations that then really rely on sometimes authorities outside of the Met Council to allow us to implement them, recommendations and legislation for changing transportation funding allocations. And when I look at the short description, the more equitable transportation system decision making and outcomes, great. I think we all embrace that, but some of the measurements, BIPOC representation and BIPOC transportation engagement do not necessarily result in more equitable transportation system decision making. And so there's almost a sense of, if we're going to invest this much money in trying to work towards these outcomes, it's almost like a campaign, right? It's not just a study that will develop, that will create recommendations. It means that the region needs to embrace the outcomes of more equitable transportation decision making. And so I don't know. I mean, I love this idea. I think it is how we should work. I just want us to be very realistic about what the actual day-to-day impacts of a study like this might be on our transportation system decision making. And I'm just involved in a lot of really parallel work to this, and around homelessness, around housing, around economic investment, where a lot of money like this is being invested in processes like these. And at the end of the day, it's the people who control the resources that make the difference. And so we could have all the great recommendations, proposed legislation. That doesn't mean that's going to pass, right? It still, at the end of the day, is a political decision. And so I just want us to acknowledge that. And if we're going to invest at this level in trying to achieve these outcomes, I think part of that, I can't think of any other word, a better word to use than campaign. Part of that campaign to see that the legislators, the Met Council, the people who control the resources actually buy into this. So I'm just a little concerned about the sort of dollar per practical payoff value here.
Councilmember Barber, did you want to respond, or I was going to?
Go ahead, Amy.
I'll just add quickly, Councilmember Lilligren, I hear what you're saying. One of the things we've already been doing is talking with the Department of Transportation, because it became pretty clear in thinking about this project that if we just deal with regional funding, a lot of our funding just gets handed to us, and we don't make decisions on how much we get. We make decisions on what we do with it, but not how much we get, really, or what other strings are tied to it through the Constitution and legislation. So we have been talking with MnDOT. I would say they haven't committed to the project, but they're very interested and they've expressed interest. At this point, they're waiting a little bit to see what we step forward with, and then we would hope to approach them to either match the funding or potentially do something parallel to our work. But I think it's very important to get to the transportation funding piece and ask ourselves questions with an equity lens of how do we allocate funding? And we need MnDOT to be there with us on that piece of the evaluation. And I think the changes that we'll be able to recommend probably will have some statewide impact, so we're going to need them to be our partners.
Thank you. Thanks, Amy.
Okay, next one is Grow Transit Assistance Program.
One sec. Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. Yeah, good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. My name is Nicholas Ewell. I'm the Senior Manager of Revenue Operations at Metro Transit. And I'm here with an exciting opportunity today to help grow the Transit Assistance Program, otherwise known as TAP. TAP is the region's low-income fare program that started in 2017 that provides discounted bus and light rail rides for only $1 for low-income riders. Individuals with income levels at or below 185% of the federal poverty guidelines or 50% of the area median income are qualified for the TAP reduced fare. While TAP has continued to grow over the past 4 years, we know that there are still many eligible users who are not enrolled or maybe not even familiar with this program. We estimate there's nearly 250,000 people in Twin Cities who could be eligible for this program, and we haven't quite hit 10% of that eligible population yet. And we think these initiatives could help us get there. With these initiatives funded using one-time monies, we think we can both increase the number of partners we have who work with our customers to qualify them for TAP and increase the awareness and the utility program overall. This proposal is aimed at accomplishing both, working with partners and driving increased awareness among individual users. Metro Transit has staff that currently work with agencies to help promote growth and drive opportunities, but with only one full-time staff member and other teams splitting TAP growth with other outreach activities, opportunities are limited. In addition, the agencies that help promote and grow TAP are helping out their clients in many ways, and sometimes resources, including funds and staff time, are limited in how much they can put towards helping grow TAP. The hope is with these funds is that it helps identify how additional funding and resources can help grow TAP penetration, and also help understand if some initial funding for each new TAP user, as well as some incentive for actually riding, will help increase overall participation. With that, there's 3 actions we're pursuing with this opportunity. First, we'd like to provide a pool of grant funds for partner organizations to apply for, to identify how additional funding may help those organizations grow TAP. Possible uses of the awarded money include providing additional staffing and resources for enrollment or outreach events with TAP partners, perhaps loading starting value on cards for members, or maybe additional marketing materials that include increased TAP awareness. Second, we'd like to preload value onto go-to cards, new TAP cards, I should say, for new and re-enrolling members. The number one request we get from new TAP members is that we put some starting money on the card. As little as $5 is what we are thinking with this, to understand how that would help grow the program and maybe drive increased TAP ridership. And finally, we'd like to provide all TAP riders who use the card a month before some incentive. What we would do is pick a month and provide a benefit, go through and look at how many of those riders actually rode the month before, and then again provide them, you know, as little as $5 as a reward, and to see how that continued, how some seed money and some incentive to use that card impacts and increases ridership and enrollment. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll take any questions you have.
Are there any questions? Okay, thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I did have a question. I apologize.
Sorry, go ahead.
Overly polite and waiting. So just a question about how this functions, and I'm a little familiar with it. I just see this out in the community work, and is there an opportunity here to leverage funds? I know we work with partner organizations. It seems like from the conversations I've heard out in the community that sometimes partner organizations bring resources, sometimes staff resources, or maybe others. And so I'm just wondering if you can comment on our ability to leverage other outside resources into the TAP program with these funds.
Mr. Chair, committee member, there are a number of organizations that are perhaps more involved than others in terms of either dedicating space or dedicating resources, or perhaps putting their own monies on these cards. And so there's really a wide spectrum of what these agencies are capable of. So there is some outside investment in the TAP program from these partners, but with these additional funds, there's probably other partners that maybe aren't as, don't necessarily have those resources that they can dedicate, you know, amongst their own budgets to these cards. And we can either, you know, focus on those opportunities or figure out how to split those funds equally amongst all to see how, you know, providing perhaps even more to those bigger organizations could help, or getting down to the smaller organizations and seeing what opportunities are there. So.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. And I just comment that as we're looking at recovery, ridership recovery, and, you know, I think tools that increase ridership, and if this is one of them, should be of interest to us. Thanks.
Mr. Chair, I'll be really quick. And I think not just ridership recovery. I think if we're looking at economical recovery right now, I think that the TAP program's been a very, very successful program, been very helpful to a lot of people. And the more awareness that we can get out to people, I think, especially over the next couple of years, is really critical. So.
Great, thank you. The next item we have is a streamlined multimodal program for TAP eligible customers.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. My name is Meredith Klikatka. I'm the Shared Mobility Program Manager for Metro Transit. It's actually just going to be me presenting today. My co-presenter is under the weather. So this is another TAP-related project. As I heard in this last presentation, many of you are probably aware of the success of the TAP program over the past 3 to 4 years. As it has grown and matured, we've really had an opportunity to identify a potential improvement, both in the technology side of the program and on how to connect to some of the other low-income programs across the region, low-income transportation programs. And so what you're seeing up here is really the kind of combination of those two things. So the two kind of opportunities for growth there, the first is it can be burdensome for users to prove their eligibility for TAP. So it requires them to accumulate a lot of paperwork, have access to the internet. The sign-up process is automated, but their eligibility for the program isn't automated. So there has to be some kind of review period. The second is that a lot of the shared mobility providers, and when I say shared mobility, I mean like the Nice Ride for All program, for example, or Our Car also has a low-income assistance program. There are a lot of low-income assistance programs in transportation out there, and most of them actually use TAP eligibility as verification for if they're eligible for those other low-income programs. And so we just saw an opportunity there to kind of streamline this process and to get it all like digital and set up so users can be more quickly verified. and start using their TAP cards sooner and start using some of those other eligibility programs. I know this is a little bit more technical and frankly beyond me, so I kind of broke it down into 3 different aspects of the project. That first one is the automation of TAP eligibility for Metro Transit customers. So that would require us to work with DHS or the Metro counties potentially to automatically verify eligibility through the DHS system. The second is really the automation of TAP sign up when people become eligible for any program, whether it's WIC or SNAP. At the state level, this would automatically opt them in to kind of grow that TAP. I think I just heard Nick say 250,000 potential users. And then the third is on the Metro Transit side, really doing some development work that will allow us to automatically verify an active TAP user as they sign up for those shared mobility provider low-income programs. And with that, I will leave it open to questions.
Any questions? So, thank you. So what I'm gonna do with the last few, if we could just get a 2-minute overview from people, and we won't do questions right now, and we will have this on our agenda in 2 weeks, and we'll bring it back. But I just wanted to let all the council members just get a high level of each of the items so they can be thinking about it, and we can then we can hopefully work to make some decisions at the next meeting, ask more questions if we need to do that. So about 2 minutes, we need to get onto our other item at about 3:15, so, or thereabouts. So thanks, Brian.
All right, thank you, Chair, and you're able to hear me okay?
We are, go ahead.
All right, excellent. Well, I'm proud to be here. I'm joined by Matt Dacre, Director of Bus Maintenance. What we have today is a program that also involves workforce development. Aaron and Councilmember Barber both referenced and talked about our mechanic technician training program. This program is applying some of the lessons learned we've had from other workforce development programs to bring staff into our skilled trades within, in this case, bus maintenance, and really develop a program that is led and run by Metro Transit using our knowledge base of existing employees to create a curriculum and a substitute for the college degree requirement by conducting a 1.5-year long program that encompasses all of the familiarization required, plus classroom training, plus on-the-job training with mentors, and then in more of a solo environment. But we're really proud to bring this forward, and I'll just say quickly that this is one of the items that may not have shown up in our 2021 budget, primarily because presently, the good news is we don't have an acute need for bus mechanics. We're doing well on staffing, but we know that this is something we need to prepare ourselves for. And secondly, as you can imagine, as everyone appreciates, the team has had its hands really full with getting through COVID and maintaining service and everything else. And so this type of program will lend itself to development this year and then hopefully implementation in 2022.
Great, thank you. Public Art Equity Project.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. My name is Anna Flintoft. I'm the manager of Facility Planning and Urban Design, and I'm joined by Mark Granlund, who is our Public Art Administrator. And Mark will talk about this project. I would just say briefly that Metro Transit's Public Art program has been really focused in recent years on keeping the collection in a state of good repair and setting up projects and processes that are create a sustainable program and that are more focused on temporary artworks. We don't have a budget for major permanent artworks, and we haven't added any major artworks since the Green Line opened. But there are a couple locations where we think there are really important opportunities.
Thank you, Anna. Chair, this is Mark Granlund. I'm the Public Art Administrator for Metro Transit. And this proposal is about creating 2 public art projects, large-scale projects, permanent artworks to our collection at 2 stations. One is Franklin Avenue LRT station, and one is the 35W Lake Street BRT station. I'll just talk about each of those sites for a moment. At Franklin in 2019, late 2019, engaged communities there around the station about one of the original artwork pieces when the Blue Line was built. It was a neon marquee at Franklin Avenue. It never worked really well, hadn't worked for a few years before I came on board 4 years ago. And so we've talked to the community and about having it removed and deaccessioned from our collection because it was too expensive to repair and too finicky to have as public art. But in all of those meetings, the community expressed the desire to have public art replace the public art that was removed. And currently Franklin Avenue is the only station of all of our LRT stations that do not have the original artwork or artwork that was originally put there when it was built. So, and there's a lot of nice spaces at the platform and the vertical circulators where public art could happen. Lake Street, of course, is a brand new station that isn't even open yet, but being built. If you've been down there or you know anything about it, there's 20 pillars underneath there holding up the bridges. That's 6,600 square feet of surface that will be basically just painted one color at this point. We'd like to really see these pillars as a place where the local community could really be reflected back to the community by engaging the community. Both of these projects would have a lot of community engagement involved, working with the community neighborhoods around there. At the Lake Street station in particular, there's 4 different neighborhoods that all their corners meet right at that station. So there's a lot of opportunity to do engagement and to work through some issues of engagement in a time of COVID by using artists from those neighborhoods to help develop and create the engagement that then results in the creation of these public art pieces. And I'll just refer, as Anna was saying, there's never been budget line item for new artworks in our budget. All the artworks have come from FTA funding from larger projects, such as creating an entire rail line. And a few years ago, FTA rules changed where FTA funding could not be used for public art anymore. So we've had to try to figure out how to deal with that. And as Anna says, there was a budget created that has been focused on deferred maintenance from all these years of neglect. And that's what that's been going for. So since we're a crunch on time, I'll leave it there, I guess, unless Anna, there's anything else you'd like to add, I missed. Okay.
Great, thank you. The next item we had is the update on the 2016 Child Care and Transit Study.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. I'm Lucy Galbraith. I'm the Director of Transit-Oriented Development. And back in 25 years ago, we did a study of childcare along the then high-frequency transit network and discovered that there was enough, there were a lot of childcare places accessible. And because we had Wilder do the study, they were able to talk to both the facility managers and the parents involved, and we ended up with a list of recommendations of ways we could encourage and make more welcoming the transit for parents and children. And the 5 years since, a number of things have happened, not to mention COVID. And especially this year, in the last year, more than 3 million women have dropped out of the labor force in this country, and childcare turns out to be a major reason. So we have, one of the things we, Metro Transit, have learned over this last year is who are the essential workers and where are the essential destinations. But we have this gap of not knowing about childcare. And TOD has no budget for outside studies, but we are intersectional and we care about a lot of things. So we worked with Wilder 5 years ago, and we would like this small grant now to do a similar update study here that would be enlarged a little bit, and that we would both get the kind of macro level of where are the parents of small children, working parents of small children living along transit. And of course, our high frequency network has changed. And then also have interviews again to kind of try to map it, and also to assess how much progress we made on some things from the last study. Just to let you know, one of the recommendations from the last study was to change our stroller policy, and we have done that. So there are things we could do to at least identify challenges and problems on this, and to add childcare. As one of my favorite senators has said, childcare is essential infrastructure for working people, and the first step is to know something about it. So that's what this study is about and why we would want to do it, since we did it before. And I can take any questions. Did I talk fast enough?
Yeah, we're gonna keep going for right now. Okay. One thing I will just say, just make sure we get disaggregated data if we end up doing that study. So, expanding multicultural marketing reach and frequency. Thank you, Lucy.
Thank
you.
Yes,
good afternoon. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. I'm Bruce Howard, Director of Marketing and Transit Information at Metro Transit. This request would include 5 projects to strengthen Metro Transit's marketing activities and approaches to more effectively reach and resonate with the diverse communities that we serve. And so I will note that we do multicultural marketing today, and by that I mean we do target segments of the total population based on ethnic background, using community, press, radio, access TV, with specific messages to help promote Metro Transit's products and services. And of course, we do provide information about our services in other languages and do other things as required by Title VI. What this would really do would help us go beyond what we're doing today. And so real quickly, just some of the types of activities here that we're talking about would be to conduct focus groups with our diverse communities, to find out how they access and consume media in order to better meet needs they may have in terms of how they want to receive information about Metro Transit products and services. We take those findings from the focus group and implement those. But the key here is that whatever we do would be based on what the community is telling us, not based on what we as staff think we need to do. Another piece of this would be inserting into our creative services and our creative process some partnerships with the BIPOC community, including artists, illustrators, influencers, and others, so that we could integrate more diverse voices into our promotional activities. And then finally, we would also be looking to enter into some year-long contracts with some multicultural media. As I mentioned, we do use them today. To some extent, this would be, again, expanding on this. So here, I guess the bottom line is helping us do more and better work in that area. That's a brief overview of that, Mr. Chairman.
Great. Thank you, Bruce. And the second one, investing in transit information technologies.
Yes, that one is mine as well. So this again would be about 5 or 6 projects we think here to increase access and availability of transit information for our blind and low vision customers, also for our limited English proficiency customers, and customers within areas of concentrated poverty. And so some of the things that we'd be doing here are pretty cool and innovative. For example, we'd be looking to pilot a wayfinding navigation app for our blind and low vision customers that would essentially allow an agent, not our staff at this point, but a vendor, to connect up with that customer using the camera on their phones to help guide them through an area that they may not be familiar with. So for example, to transfer from bus to bus, if they're not familiar, they could actually turn on their camera and the agent could use that camera and the app on their phone to help them navigate. Another thing that we'd be doing would be expanding our real-time transit information displays, perhaps in areas of concentrated poverty. Again, today we provide the data feed for real-time information, but the businesses and apartment complexes and what have you have to provide the digital screens. And so what this would do would be to help fund some of those digital screens so that we could make that real-time information more widely available. And then we'd also look at expanding some language options on our Next Trip and Go-To Card IVR, so interactive voice response on our phone system. Currently we have English and Spanish. This would allow us to expand to some additional languages. So again, that's a quick overview, Mr. Chairman.
Great, thank you. All right, so we will we'll work with staff, just think about how we collate the information we have and how we narrow it down, and we will have time on our agenda at the next meeting to ask some additional questions and share additional information, sort of try to figure out which ones of many of these great projects that we're going to be able to fund. So with that, does somebody have a motion for me?
Mr. Chair, I would move to close the meeting under section 13D.03 subdivision 1 of Minnesota state statutes so we can consider a labor development and negotiation related to labor strategies.
Is there a seconder of that motion?
Second by Gonzalez.
Okay. And we will not be coming back into our meeting when we've completed that conversation, right? So.